and thank you for joining us for this episode of Cinema Craptaculus Presents The Expanded Universe with your hosts John H.H. Ford, Mario Doc Diaz, and S'more. From movies to TV series to toys to comics to pop culture, this show is your safe space for all things geeky and where you can get your geek on. This is John H.H., and Doc isn't with us, so S'more, we can just make up his opinions on his behalf and ruin his movie street cred.
Oh, yes. I will be taking the role of both S'more and Doc.
Hi, this is Doc. I really like The Flash. Really, Doc?
Really, Doc? Oh, yeah. I love The Flash. Flash is awesome. Flash is my favorite movie ever.
We'll put that in our headliner promo piece, too. You know.
Doc, are you wearing a Flash costume right now?
That would be funny. I don't know why we don't do this on YouTube or Facebook streaming, and then we'd be in cosplay. Like, I guess I'd be in my indie outfit, right? For this weekend?
You would be. Oh, do I have to be Miles Morales Spider-Man?
Yeah. Hey, real quick, before we get into today's big, giant summer movie discussion, S'more, what are you watching these days? What's entertaining you?
Well, I've seen a number of movies this summer. I've seen The Guardians 3. I've seen The Flash. I've seen Indy. I've seen Across the Spider-Verse. Tried to watch Extraction 2, and I realized I haven't seen Extraction 1.
We just reviewed that on Cinema Craptaculus, by the way, and so you could just listen to our lovely sister podcast, and that'll be enough.
You know what? I will do that. No offense to Chris Helmsworth. I probably will do that. Save me some time.
Well, you listen to the show. It was worthwhile. Like, we all gave it a decent, like, Craptaculus. It was like, you're bored on a Sunday, and I've been trying to catch up on shows that have already ended. Like, so I finished Maisel, loved it.
Yes.
Still have not finished Ted Lasso to this date. It's been wrapped for a couple weeks, and I amazingly missed spoilers. That's good. Back into the Great on, is it Hulu? Season 3 with Elle Fanning. That's a little rough start. I'm not sure where it's going. I think Jack Ryan is wrapping its final round, so we should jump into that. But we kind of want to get to that point where we have finished the shows or the seasons and then can start something new that's recommended. And it's hard to do that. And then, of course, you ask people, well, what do you recommend? And you get like 50 shows to watch. You're like, oh.
Yeah. Have you been watching Perry Mason? I hear it's on his last season as well.
Well, yeah, it did not get picked up for season 3, so whatever just came out is the end. I don't have the ability to watch Max, so do you recommend it?
I do. It's a good show. Solid.
Okay. Well, I love season 1. Well, we should probably get into the actual topic of what we're talking about, although it's good to check in. So summer movies are well underway. And this, we thought would be a good time to just check in kind of at the halfway point, I would say, maybe a little over, and see what's out there, what's done well, what's not doing well. And it's hard because, you know, when this episode airs, I believe will be right before Mission Impossible and right after Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So why don't we back up a bit, S'more, and talk about like what kicked things off and how'd they do?
Okay, so I believe the movie that kicked off our lovely summer season is, you know what? Just remember something. Before I start this, I have a quick trivia question for you. I know it's out of nowhere. What do the years 1989, 2008, and 2023 have in common?
Batman.
And?
Indiana Jones.
Yes! Give the man a prize.
I'm going to bring our quiz show back, by the way, so it's appropriate that you did that. S'more, so you say that summer kind of kicked off with Guardians of the Galaxy 3 way back at the beginning of May, yeah?
Yes, it did. And for those who have not seen it, I must say that it was quite enjoyable, and it has made quite a bit of money in the past couple of months. I believe it's up to $800 million worldwide box office.
You said it's the highest grossing Marvel Phase 4 film to date?
That would be Phase 5, and it's...
Oh my gosh.
The second film.
We're at Phase 5 already.
We're at Phase 5. Phase 4, while it didn't make money, hasn't really been universally received well. I think Phase 5 had a bit of a rocky start with Ant-Man. It came out early in February, but everyone seems to enjoy Guardians 3. And I think that praise is well received. Like I said before, I've seen it. It's a nice final chapter to the Guardians trilogy. And I'm not quite sure if, at least I don't feel it quite ties in to the whole multiverse aspect that Marvel's trying to go for. But I do think it's a nice sort of standalone second chapter in Phase 5.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. A little dark in spots for me. I agree with your assessment. And, speaking of massive franchises, right on its heels, I believe, was Fast X.
Yes.
Which was that the 10th Fast and Furious movie?
It is, with Jason Momoa as the bad guy. Aquaman.
Well, it did really well, too. It didn't make as much as Guardians. It made just shy of 700 million worldwide. And, this whole world we're in is post-pandemic.
Yes.
In some cases, still crossing from the pandemic, because most of these films were made during it. So all the production challenges of filming during COVID are kind of felt in every film we're seeing. So there's going to be this weird sort of period where we're out of it, and then no one can really use the excuse of the pandemic for why films were challenging. It's going to be just other challenges. But all these films kind of crossed into that. Fast 10, so much of these films are done with CGI. It's hard to know if these actors were even together when they made it.
Right.
But I didn't see it, so Doc probably would have weighed in, because I think that is a film that he would at least have more of an opinion on. But for May movies, I think they kicked things off well. And then the traditional May, I think Memorial Day weekend film, was it The Little Mermaid from Disney?
It was The Little Mermaid. I think it made decent box office at $507 million.
Yeah, so far.
I'm not sure. I think I've heard mixed reviews about it. People said it was okay, and then some people sort of hated it. I know there's some backlash, and a lot of it's sort of unfair backlash, because apparently The Little Mermaid's not Daddy's Little Mermaid. I don't want to go into the politics of it, but a lot of people have issues with the lead. I haven't seen it, so I can't give you a true opinion on it.
Well, Little Mermaid has legs. Haha. I'm the only person that said that. No, because it's consistently done well. I mean, part of it is it seems to be the only sort of family film that you can take young people to. I think that we could do an entire episode on the live action remakes of Disney. I have my personal opinions. Right. And they're not positive ones towards, obviously the concept is very successful for Disney. I think they've all pretty much made money. I think Mulan kind of notwithstanding, because it was smack in the middle of the lockdowns and pandemic. But these live action remakes are coming fast and furious, no pun intended.
I see what you did there.
On the horizon. So we'll have to, wish the film, congratulations for its success. But I have my own feelings that have nothing to do with maybe the films themselves and more of the idea of what Disney's doing. But Speaking of family-friendly films, so the next two that kind of came out that formed summer movie going, were Transformers: Rise of the Beasts and Spider-Man: Across the Universe. I think those films pretty much were aimed at kids.
It was.
And fanboys, adults with toys.
Especially Transformers: Rise of the Beast, because, and this is not a spoiler, it's in the trailer, there's a character by the name of Unicron in the film who's the big bad. And for those like me who remember the animated Transformers movie, Transformers! Unicron was the big bad, and he was voiced by Orson Welles, which is his final film.
Is this film a reboot of the reboot, or is it all sort of a continuation of the original film that came out in 2007? I haven't been keeping up with the Transformers movies. I know there was that one with Mark Wahlberg, and I don't really know. And then there was a Bumblebee kind of prequel, I guess. I don't know. But are they continuing, or is this all reboot territory?
What it is a mess. Just kidding! No, it's sort of a continuation / reboot. This makes sense. Now I'll explain. The first 3, I believe, Transformer movies were all in the same sort of setting.
They were in the Shia-verse.
They were in the Shia-verse, and while it didn't make money,
or the Megan Fox-verse, whichever.
Oh God, the Megan Fox-verse, and did make money, but a lot of fans, myself included, didn't quite appreciate or like the direction it was going or the design, so they made a film called Bumblebee, which surprisingly enough stuck to the original designs of the Generation 1 Transformers. Those who know what Generation 1 is, the first sort of Transformer toys that came out. And that was well received. It made a decent amount of box office. And so from that point on, and that's also had Mark Wahlberg and Haley Steinfeld, from that point on, they decided to sort of pivot and go in that direction. So it's not necessarily a reboot, but it's not the continuation of the Shia-verse either, if that makes sense. And so from that point forward, you have that Transformers sort of universe.
So Spider-Man Across, speaking of universes,
Yes.
is the follow-up to the kind of groundbreaking film that came out a couple of years ago.
Into the Spider-Verse, yes.
It's doing really well. I mean, of all the films so far, I think, pound for pound, I think Spider-Verse Across the Universe, or Across the Spider-Verse, they're over $500 million. and, shows that Miles Morales and that Sony's style of animation are very popular. One thing about the Spider-Verse film that I've noted is that it became a template for a lot of these other animation companies to follow. Pixar was always the kind of the gold standard, and when they would do something the other animation houses would follow. Then Disney kind of got it back, and now Sony's got it with them because, I saw the Puss in Boots 2 sequel at DreamWorks had that kind of comic style of Spider-Verse. And then I've noticed it in just a lot of films that have come out like on Netflix. Nimona is a film that just came out this past weekend on Netflix. We don't really count it in the summer films, but in all fairness, it was an animated release and it had that same style. So Spider-Verse is not only doing well, it is literally kind of leading the artistic charge in the industry.
Yes, and you know what? I have seen Across the Spider-Verse. I did like it. Full confession, wasn't necessarily a fan of the first Into the Spider-Verse movie. I do acknowledge that the animation was different and spectacular. This one was a little bit different for me because I felt that they spent a little bit more time with character development in this film, which I appreciated and made me sort of attach myself a little bit more to the characters and a little bit more invested. So yeah. I like this one a lot. And there were a couple of scenes, if you haven't seen the film yet, I do recommend you going to see this. They've had some spectacular, just pretty visuals and pretty scenes that you can tell they really poured their heart and soul into this. So I do recommend it.
Animation is getting to a territory where it is starting to phase out a little bit of older folks, because I found Spider-Verse a bit of an assault on the senses, both in the volume of the theater it was in, but also just the editing. It was so fast, clearly catering to the younger, lower attention span. And I don't want to single that film out entirely because, again, some of the other films that have come from the other studios are kind of like that, where they don't want to sort of let the scene breathe because they're fearful they're going to lose the kids watching, I guess. I don't know. But it's just so fast-paced. And I think that gets into our expectations of what we want out of a movie. And it's a good segue to the first real stumbles of the year, which would be Pixar's Elemental and Warner Brothers' The Flash. Starting with Elemental, I didn't see it, and I don't think Disney did a great job marketing it. Where I am, I sort of rely on just internet pop-ups more than, say, network television commercials ads. But my first sort of impression, it was very heavily influenced by previous Disney films, whether it's Soul or Inside Out. It felt like familiar territory. And maybe that's not fair because I've actually heard that people liked it. What have you heard? Pretty
much the same thing. I haven't seen it either. I just wonder if maybe there's a little bit of fatigue there as well, because this is yet another film that sort of substitute human characters for abstract ideas. And I wonder if people aren't really digging that anymore. I've heard mixed reviews. Some people say it's good. Some people say it's okay. I haven't heard bad reviews. I just haven't heard glowing reviews. And maybe, I'm not sure, is Pixar losing their touch? Do we need a break from Pixar's for a while? I'm not sure.
I don't know if it's a break from Pixar. I think we shouldn't, and again, this is stuff that I've read, but I also felt this way, that they basically trained us during, at the start of the pandemic and the launch of Disney Plus to watch films on streaming. And they've trained us to know that within a 45-day window, these films are going to be on Disney Plus or a streaming platform. So if you're a family who is like, well, why should we go spend all this money to go see this Pixar film when we know we're going to watch it in our living room in less than 2 months? You know what I mean?
That's a good
so
point.
They kind of have trained the audience to just not want to go to the cinemas. And that is what is plaguing all of these films, is that a generation, if not 2 generations, are not being groomed as moviegoers. We have discussed this ad nauseum in previous podcasts, haven't we?
We have. And you know what? I'm among those people. There's a lot of films that I would rather wait for streaming. I'm not going to spend that kind of money or spend the time. I'm not going to drop, $20 for parking, $20 for the film, popcorn, food, whatnot, to see a film that I think will best be served at the comfort of my own home.
Do you think they'll start, when I say they, do you think Disney, as an example, will start expanding that window?
Maybe.
Meaning like, okay, maybe, you got to wait 3 months.
It's possible. And they also might decide, depending on how the market goes, that a lot of these films are best served streaming.
I don't see how they make money, because if the subscriber base is plateauing or shrinking, Disney did have quite a drop-off from quarter to quarter. Certainly from last year to this year, they expected to grow, I think, by 2 million. I think they lost double that in people, not subscribing. And so maybe the box office is where you can still make your money, but it costs a lot to get it out there. And there's so many cinemas that are closing. And, like Cineworld is at the parent company filing for Chapter 11. And I don't know. Maybe you just release less films?
Maybe, or what we might end up saying is just bigger blockbusters and franchises and sequels and remakes, because those seem to be the only films that make a lot of.
Speaking of which, the big, hiccup was The Flash, which you saw.
Yes, I did.
And that's an interesting one because there was a lot of buzz a while ago. I want to say months ago, even before the Super Bowl trailer of like, oh, this is the next Back to the Future. Oh, forget about, the drama around Ezra Miller and the Snyderverse being ended. This is going to be the best superhero ever. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
I think they were planting stuff on the internet. I think we're in an era now where they are trying to, and everybody plants buzz, but I think they were manufacturing buzz.
Let me just say this, John. My mama told me that if you have nothing good to say nothing at all. But I'm going to ignore that because this is a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the idea behind the direction this movie was taken, but let's just say that it's probably a good thing this is one of the last entries into the Snyderverse that we're going to see, because it just wasn't good. I'm sorry, it wasn't good. Sorry, Flash fans. If you're a Flash fan, don't see this film.
There's a lot of reasons why I think it didn't do well. I think one of the biggest ones, and I don't know if Ezra Miller's legal problems were the thing. Mm-hmm. I just know that if there's a lot of focus by Warner Brothers promoting James Gunn's new DC universe, then fans might just not want to care to see. They're so used to films tying into the greater vision of a saga. Why go spend money on a film that's not going to go anywhere?
Well, here's the thing, because I really feel badly for DC fans and particularly Flash fans, because the DC characters are some of the most iconic superheroes out there. They're iconic characters. And in my opinion, they haven't really been treated very well.
What are you talking about? Flash got 9 seasons on the CW. Like, Flash got a pretty long run. Now, do we care about cinematic treatment versus television?
Yes, because people want to see their heroes on the big screen. I want to see my heroes on the big screen. I want to see a big screen Superman, a good big screen Superman, but a big screen Superman. I have to give movie makers and producers and writers and workers their credit, because they probably worked hard on this. They put their effort into this. They put their time in this, and it deserves to have some recognition. But at the same time, there are some missteps. There are some questions I have. Let's take the CGI, for example. I know that the director came out and defended the CGI, saying that it was intentional. Really? Was that intentional? For me, it's okay to admit that maybe there's a budget issue. Maybe there's a taste issue, whatnot, but I just think that the DC characters in particular for the cinemas need better treatment than they're given. And who knows, maybe James Gunn will do this. I know he has his casting news for Superman Legacy, which I personally enjoy. We shall see. But as far as The Flash goes, I think there's a reason why it didn't do well at the box office. And it's not superhero fatigue. It's not just Ezra Miller, even though he's probably a part of that. It's storytelling. It's execution. And the execution was, let's just say, not up to par.
I think there is a bit of superhero fatigue. I think we've felt it. We're to the point now where even Marvel is starting to kind of like, oh my gosh, there's just too much, and we've seen it all. So I think what you'll see is a little bit of pulling back on how close films come out. I think Warner Brothers, they dumped Batgirl, so they're perfectly willing to lose money and just shelve a project. But I think with Flash, they might have hoped that we will get just enough to maybe break even, because they clearly are burning this film off, and I don't know what they're going to do with marketing and promotion for Aquaman 2, but that's another one where they just kind of want to get it out, then they'll be done with the Snyderverse, then James Gunn can, get Superman Legacy up out, and that just recently got cast, so that's taking some buzz. And they just want that slate that restarted as soon as possible, is my guess.
Yeah. And as far as superhero fatigue goes, I'm sure there is some. But then you have movies like Guardians and Across the Spider-Verse that make lots of money. So is it all superhero fatigue? I don't think so.
Well, but Guardians is also the end of a trilogy, and that's a strong franchise. You can actually be a Guardians fan without actually being a huge Marvel fan.
Yeah, what about
they do kind of stand in
That's
their own.
That's the second entry. in a trilogy. It made a lot of money.
Yes, but it's Spider-Man is always going to make money. To your point, if you make a good movie, it doesn't matter. I think we'll sort of test out the theory of whether there is actual superhero fatigue in sort of the next round, which would be what? The Marvels?
The Marvels.
And then Aquaman 2, and then, of course, next year.
Hey, we'll be right back. And now, back to the show.
So this past weekend, we had Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and that was Disney's other big tentpole. We probably should devote an entire show on it because by the time this episode airs, I think people who will have seen it will have sort of made their judgment on it.
Translation, y'all. Indie podcast coming soon. Get ready.
I don't know. I think it'll make about $60 million in its opening 3-day weekend, which is Bob Iger's going to spin it as a win, but that film cost close to $300 million to make when you add in P&A, and I think that it is one that was apparently plagued with some, COVID shutdowns. Ford had an injury. I believe there were reshoots. Yeah. Looking at that last act, I wouldn't be surprised if the whole act was reshot.
Probably.
But, that could be another one where the fatigue sets in where people are like, well, didn't really like the last one, and it's been 15 years. Who cares? And
it's been 15 years.
It's going to be on Disney Plus in 3 months or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe it was another one where people were burned by the last one, and they can't deny that, they know, Harrison Ford's in great shape, but do we really want to see a 78-year-old Indy? I was looking forward to the film, but my expectations were low.
Well, let me same here. Look, I love Indy. Love Harrison Ford. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. There were no expectations for me. After Crystal Skull, my expectations were low. So I went in with that, and I think it helped. Love Harrison Ford. I actually liked Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I thought she did a good job. I felt all the nostalgia and all the beats, felt it. Let's just say, for me, it's time to move on from this franchise.
Yeah, it is a kind of a unique beast. Other than, the Star Wars films where we saw characters that we loved in their older age. Yeah. This one we've sort of seen progress, although there was a pretty large gap between the third one and the fourth one. Yeah. And, it brings up a question of whether, is the actor more influential than the character? Can you just recast like they did with J.J. Abrams' Star Trek? Or do you let these actors age out? I always thought they were going to, once Disney owned Lucasfilm, they were just going to reboot it. Yeah. Especially when I heard that Spielberg and Lucas weren't really keen on doing anymore. Lucas was basically out. But Harrison Ford, it is his role. So it was kind of unique experience to see a guy age. But the character just exists for me, in the world of 1930s movie serials from the childhood of the original filmmakers. That it was something that was fun. It was kind of like Lucas's version of a James Bond film that his buddy Spielberg could direct. And they brought in all the elements of the films that they enjoyed as kids, those adventure films. And you had an actor that was in the, prime of his career. And maybe you should have just left it there. And it would just be like the Back to the Future trilogy. It's just something we go back to. Apparently, there's money to be made. And I think that's really where Disney has complicated these franchises. In owning the Star Wars films and the Indiana Jones, they have turned what was originally a vision by the original creators and turned it into corporate filmmaking. And that's just going to complicate it, period.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the perfect way to describe this. This is corporate filmmaking. It felt like corporate filmmaking. It felt like you put the menu together that people will like and choose from, and boom, you have a brand. It's all branding. This is a branded product, and you put your branded product out there. People will pay money for this branded product, and if people, like it, then they'll buy more of it.
S'more, I agree with you. I think that if this film ultimately is kind of a money loser for Disney, I don't know that it's the end of the Indiana Jones franchise. It just may say like, well, we honored the original Harrison Ford iteration. We own this property. We can maybe do something different with it later down the road. But I would probably put some blame on whoever's brilliant idea it was to debut this film, along with Elemental, I guess, at Cannes, because it's been sitting there on Rotten Tomatoes with whatever crappy review it had for 6 weeks. And somebody squeezed in a few good reviews to kind of get it over the freshness hump. But if a film is going to be problematic, and I think they knew it would be, you don't really have it out for critics to review 6 weeks ahead, and then the stink is there. I think that was a mistake. But also releasing it right before a film with actual stunts, not a lot of CGI in the scheme of things, fronted by an actor who's willing to literally motorcycle off a cliff and hang off a plane or whatever. So that's the next big film, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Are you excited?
You know, I am. Look, Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is going to cruise, right? A lot of the reasons why I watch this franchise now is to see what crazy stuff Tom Cruise is going to do, because we all know that he does his own stunts. The man is either insane or is one of the bravest humans on the planet. Doesn't matter to me. I enjoy it. I'm looking forward to it.
I think the aliens have imbued him with the life everlasting power. Xenu has granted him some sort of immortality. So even if he does croak falling off a building, it does make me nervous, because you think about, I think they're still filming a little bit left on Part 2. I believe that they took a pause so they could promote this, but I think they have to go back. And I'm just nervous. I'm like, oh God, please don't die. But that would be like the most amazing thing is if, I don't want to curse it, but like if he bit it, or we never saw him again, and like, wow, talk about a legacy.
John, be honest. Part of you, I know this is morbid, but be honest. Part of why the reason you watch this and you read all the reports is because you're wondering if one day dude's going to die on set.
Well, it's not like Free Solo where you're watching these stunts and if you haven't read anything ahead of time, you're cringing because even the camera crew is facing away from the camera because they can't watch. But yeah, I think we would kind of know about it if something happened. But I think that, Tom Cruise has just done something unique with this franchise. He built it around himself, which of course annoyed a lot of the original fans when the first film came out.
I was one of them.
But, I think the last couple, he's had few of the same, he's had Benji and Luther and Ilsa, and they had a great baddie in Solomon Lane, and really created this whole syndicate. Kind of like, again, we've talked about this, like they basically did what the Craig Bond films kind of didn't really accomplish, which was create films that appeal to a wider audience, that are fun, and that have like a genuine sense of stunts, espionage, gadgets, and, kind of real world intrigue in a fantasy world.
Agreed. For me, once I got over the fact that this was not Mission Impossible in my mind, because I watched the original series and I knew the original characters, once I got over that, once I realized this is a Tom Cruise show, I start to enjoy them and I think they're enjoyable films. And you're right, they've accomplished something that Craig's Bond did not do. They made it fun with a network that they're trying to defeat. They made it fun. It's fun to watch. It's enjoyable. It's entertainment.
Well, Tom Cruise is not just sort of saving the box office, because, he did push for Top Gun Maverick last year to be in theaters. And it got people to remember why we go to the movies. Not every film can be a Mission Impossible film. They spent a lot of money to make sure that this film could survive during lockdown. Remember, didn't they have like a cruise ship where the whole crews were in their little bubble? And then, of course, the famous sort of Christian Bale-esque tirade where he went off on crew members who went out partying when they weren't supposed to. And they had their own little shutdowns during COVID, but ultimately, these films are practical in their stunt work and their locations. These other films like, the Hemsworth Extraction and the Fast and the Furious, and a lot of these action films that we see outside of Mission Impossible, they're very CGI. There's very much, and our brain knows. We know when we're seeing something that is good as the technology is, we can still tell. And I think now we know that Tom Cruise is willing to hang off a building or a plane or jump off rooftops and pilot a real helicopter. Our brain is just keyed in when we see a Mission Impossible trailer to go, oh shit, what's he going to do?
Yeah, which makes it fun. More of that. More Tom Cruise. More Tom Cruise doing crazy shit, please.
Well, it's kind of all he's got now, because, I don't think he's going to do another Top Gun. I'm sure they'll throw money at him. And this franchise, I believe, does end. I don't know. We'll believe that when we see it. But what else is coming out this summer? We have a little bit of time, just real quick. So summer's halfway over. It's really a wasteland of an August. There's really nothing. But a couple films round out July and August.
Right. Let's start with Doc's favorite director and favorite film, Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer. I know Doc's excited about Oppenheimer and he loves Christopher Nolan. Like, he dresses like him, got his autograph. Seriously, folks, he loves Chris Nolan.
I think we need to do a special podcast for Cinema Craptaculus where it's just a live stream of a camera trained on Doc as he's forced to watch Oppenheimer in a theater. And it's just like, and so if he falls asleep or rolls his eyes or yawns excessively, it's just going to be all streamed for people to watch.
And it'll be awesome because he so loves Christopher Nolan. Guess what, guys? He hates him. But anyway.
Well, like Tom Cruise, Christopher Nolan does deliver that cinema experience, and he is one of the few sort of vocal voices that gets really heard, that cuts through. Because, someone brought up a point. As much as Chris Hemsworth and Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds are doing well with their Netflix films and paychecks, neither of them are saying, it must be seen in a theater. They're pretty content with this whole streaming dynamic. Whereas Cruise and Nolan, probably Cameron falls into that category. They are insisting on, it belongs in a cinema, as Indy would say. And I think the audience recognize that. So if they know these guys are banging the drum to save movies, they know they're going to make as good as one as possible. So I'm looking forward to Oppenheimer. I don't think it's going to be an uplifting film. No. And these guys are old school. That's why they want it in theaters. But yeah, I'm a theater guy too. I'm looking forward to Oppenheimer. I said to my son, are you looking forward to seeing that? Because we saw the trailer. He's like, what's it about? I said, it's about creating the first nuclear bomb. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's going to really be an uplifter for millennials and Gen Z. And
it'll be fun, kids.
But, counter programming, same weekend, is Barbie, directed by, what is her name? Greta Gerwig, and starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling.
It's funny because initially when I heard about this, I had no desire to see this. Like, why would I want to see a movie about a doll, Barbie? Who cares, right? But then as I start reading more into it and seeing behind the scenes for it, I'm actually interested in seeing this because it's a satire.
Well, and it's funny, you could just see the reviews. They're going to say, and playing the titular lead characters. Where does that phrase come from, titular? Because it just sounds inappropriate.
Sounds dirty.
What does the word even mean? Is it like muscle bound?
I think it just applies to the centerpiece, basically. It highlights a focus.
Yes. And of course, one of the characters I was curious if they'll have is Growing Up Skipper, which a lot of young people may not know, but it was actually one of Barbie doll's cousins, and she'd twist her arm and she would go through puberty. She would grow and she would expand on her chest.
What? Is this a real thing?
Yeah, like in the 70s, maybe even the early 80s. I don't know. Growing Up Skipper. That was her character's name. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sure if anybody has one that's not busted and is in good working order, it's probably worth a lot on eBay.
Okay, 60s and 70s toys were messed up, dude. I think it's all the drugs, the psychedelia. Right. I mean, what?
And just sort of the free expression of sort of sexuality. They talk about like trying to, we're sexualizing our young people. Like, did you not pay attention to these toys? Like Stretch Armstrong, you can, basically he's in a wrestling thong and you can stretch him in weird ways.
I mean, do they have the puberty equivalent for Ken? Kenny? Twist his arm, certain things.
Well, they did not have like Growing Up Bobby, Ken's cousin, but yeah, I think that it does harken back a little bit to like the Brady Bunch movie in the 90s, where these fish out of water characters, where they're taking a concept, whether it's a TV show from another era or in this case a doll, and trying to sort of superimpose it into the real world. Like I think there was a SpongeBob movie even that did that, where he breaks out of the animated world. And I think that it could be a dumb movie that still will be well received because there's nothing like it. Everything's superheroes or franchises, and even though it's based on a toy, it's something original.
It's original, and it just seems off the cuff and weird, and I'm in.
Yeah,
why not?
And Ryan Gosling being goofy, and Margot Robbie, kind of in a role she was probably born to play. I love the idea that they've got, I think it's Mackie. Basically, the actresses that get confused for Margot Robbie are playing other versions of Barbie, which I think is awesome. Yeah, but then also coming out in July is Disney's Haunted Mansion remake, and I haven't seen much marketing. I wonder if they're a little nervous about promoting it. Maybe they'll ramp it up in the next month, but it opens at the end of this month.
Well, what's weird about this, because I'm not sure that this is going to come off, but I wonder if this is counter programming, because there's a movie that's coming out, or it came out, I'm not sure, but it's basically Black people dealing with horror, like a horror situation.
The Blackening.
The Blackening. Is this their version of The Blackening, except it's a remake? Because it's a mostly Black cast in Haunted Mansion. I don't know.
That's a good question, because the previous Haunted Mansion featured Eddie Murphy and his family. And so I don't know if they're remaking it, but maybe they're kind of paying homage. I don't know. I mean, you tell me if you feel that they're trying to create a film with Black people in it, or if they're just trying to create a film and the actors just happen to be Black. You know what I mean?
I want to see this. I want to see them both. and I want to decide for myself. Either way, representation, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
It just seems weird.
I think what's weird is it feels like a really soft reboot of what they were really doing well at, which is making films off their theme parks. And, you know, speaking of Margot Robbie, there was this whole hint of a remake of the Pirates franchise with her. Haven't heard anything about it. I feel like it's a no-go. I feel like, you know, Iger and new sort of voices have come in to say, let's not touch Pirates for whatever reason. I don't think it's just because of Johnny Depp's distance from the studio and the role, or if they just feel like that ship sailed. But we'll wrap this episode. There's 2 films coming out in August, and again, they're the only 2 films that even caught my attention. And one is Meg 2: The Trench, with Jason Statham returning to fight a 1,000-foot long shark. It seems like it just gets so big, impossibly big.
I mean, is this a mutant shark?
I don't know. It's like they find some trench. I mean, I love the idea of a Meg, but the reason that shark went extinct or evolved into the great white is because of food. There's no amount of food that could keep something that large. But it's all about the eating people, the CGI. Films do well overseas.
Right, right. And it's got Jason Statham, so,
I'm not even going to do my Jason. It's been a while. I'm going to ruin my voice. And then, of course, speaking of superheroes, we got The Blue Beetle, August 18th coming out.
Yes, which I believe is supposed to be the kickoff to James Gunn's universe, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I don't know. I know that it was in place. I think it was being filmed before he was announced. So either they went in and kind of reshoot it, or they're able to just maybe it films a little standalone. They just wipe out any references to other DC Snyderverse characters, and he can be a part of it. So it's got the kid from Karate Kid series. Right. If it's a fun film, it looks a little derivative of other Shazam kind of like, oh, kids got powers.
Shazam-ish, Iron Man-ish.
Miss Marvel-ish. But we'll see. I think this summer is a transition summer for a lot of reasons. It's the first summer where people really aren't, having to wear masks, that they can choose to go to the cinemas for their own reasons. And man, they're just competing with so much content.
I'm hoping this summer will help reignite the box office, because I really do like going to movies. I really do. And I mean, if these films are any indication with some of the money that a lot of them are making, then maybe it's a good sign for the health of the box office. We'll see.
Well, I think one of the biggest reasons films need to do well is because that's where they make film stars. And film stars, when they go to TV, are drivers to getting those TV shows greenlit. It's sort of like this weird catch-22. If some of the shows are built around movie stars now doing streaming series and TV, if there's no new film stars coming in, then there's no talent pool. But maybe they don't need it. Maybe you don't need a film star. Maybe you just need people who have 3 million followers, and that's enough.
Or who knows, with the advent of AI, you might be able to create stars digitally. Who knows?
Well, S'more, you have just depressed me and given us our new expanded universe topic for the future. In fact, we should just do a whole episode one time that will just be completely AI.
Hey guys, it's coming. AI generated expanded universe is coming.
Actually, this whole episode was brought to you by ChatGPT.
I am a robot.
All right. I don't think we embarrassed Doc enough behind his back, but maybe I'll insert something. But,
that's okay.
On that note.
Thanks again to those of you, both openly geeky and closeted geeky, for joining us on this expanded universe journey. This has been S'more, and with me always is my geektacular co-host, Doc.
And John. And remember that this is your safe space to talk about all things geeky, and where you can get your geek on. Geek out. We're low energy because there's no Doc.
No Doc. Geek out.
He's too busy seeing The Flash for the 3rd time.
Doc's busy watching Flash right now for the 13th time and loving it. So.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Cinema Craptaculus Presents The Expanded Universe with the Geeks. We'd also like to thank our fine sponsors. And if you'd like to help out the Expanded Universe and the Cinema Craptaculus channel, tell your friends to find us wherever they listen to their favorite podcasts and subscribe to our show. Give us a review. We appreciate that. We'd also like to give a shout out to some of the other great podcast shows out there. There's a new one on the scene in particular. If you're a Star Wars fan, you're going to love this podcast. It's called What Does Star Wars Mean to You? Or maybe I should announce it in the Clone Wars voice. What does Star Wars mean to you? It's hosted by our own Dave Humphreys, and he gets a lot of really cool guests who bring some sort of new story or angle or insight into Star Wars appreciation. Whether you're a young fan or an old fan, you're going to get something out of it. You can find What Does Star Wars Mean to You on all your favorite podcast platforms. So there you go, that's our recommendation. And we have a lot of cool stuff ourselves coming up here at the Cinema Craptaculus channel. So make sure, you keep an eye on your podcast app there to see what's new. And don't forget to do what the geeks say, geek out on whatever you like to geek out about. It's good for the soul.